Welcome to Excelling in Christ, the podcast where we cut to the bottom line. We get down to the nitty gritty, even when it steps on our own toes, even when it doesn't feel good to this body of flesh. Isaiah 55, 8 and 9 tells us that God's ways are not our ways. And today we're going to look at the value of being boring on purpose. I know that's the opposite of everything you probably ever thought or heard, but I believe that religion has been hijacked by entertainment. Today, religion has been turned into just another way to feed the flesh. It is the very opposite of what Christianity is supposed to do. If you'll look at Galatians 5:24, you'll see that Christianity is supposed to crucify the desires of the flesh, not feed the desires of the flesh. But there are groups out there nowadays that do nothing but feed the desires of the flesh with all their recreation and entertainment, and even their dancing girls on stage, though they do call it dancing in the spirit, as though that makes it okay. It is all just a focus, an intense focus on feeding the flesh. Now let me clarify. I am not trying to take all entertainment out of your life. I think there is a place for some wholesome entertainment, but I am here to say that the worship of God is not the place for entertainment. I've heard some speakers call it worship-tainment, and I think they are spot on. There are a lot of people out there saying, look folks, we got off target. I am not the only person beating this drum. There are other people that say we have taken the church too far into Disneyland, and it is time to get back to some Bible, get back to some good solid book, chapter and verse foundation, and that is what we're going to look at starting right now. So the purpose of man is to seek God. That's Acts 17, 22, 26 through 28. That is why he put us on earth. So God took man, created him, and put him in the garden. That was it. Now I want you to think about how just fundamental, how basic that was. God took Adam and stuck him in the garden to keep the garden. That's Genesis 2:15. He did not give Adam a PlayStation, no TV, no modern technology. Think about this for a moment. He took Adam naked, put him in the garden, and said, okay, I want you to keep the garden. And in that garden, Adam was going to have a relationship with God. And here's the really kind of profound thing. Adam had everything he needed while he was there in the garden in that extreme simplicity to do what God designed him to do. In Ecclesiastes 12:13, we're told the whole of man is to fear God and keep his commandments. And what I'm trying to tell you is right there in that very basic, no frills, no bells, no whistles scene, Adam had everything he needed to have a right relationship with God. And the whole concept of entertainment, recreation that has just consumed America wasn't even on the table, wasn't even a concept. So we have Adam there in the garden, and of course we have Eve, and then there's the story of the fall in Genesis chapter 3. And after the fall, life was hard. Well, life got really hard. And so man began devising ways to ease the struggle. You can read a little bit about that in Genesis 4, verse 20 through 22. So comfort and ease began to take them over. Now, it's not that there's anything necessarily wrong with finding an easier way to do a job or finding a little comfort, but somewhere along the way, they got extremely out of balance. And by the time we get to Genesis chapter 6, we read about verse 6 that every intent of the thought of the heart of man was on evil continually. Things had gotten so bad, people had become so focused on the flesh that God had to step in and correct things. So we went from that wonderful simplicity of very simple garden life to a situation that's so corrupt, God is going to have to wipe everybody out with a flood. That serious. So God steps in. He's going to correct the situation. He tells Noah to build the ark. Now, here again we get back to God's wonderful simplicity. God doesn't think like we think. When God told Noah to build the ark, it was not a Carnival cruise line. That's why only 8 souls were on it. Then he told him to build the ark. It was a big wooden barge. And with all of those animals in it, you know it smelled like a barn. And there were no entertainment facilities. There was no buffet. There were no bands. There was no wet bar. It was a big floating barn. And that was it. If God had made Carnival Cruise Lines out of the ark, then we wouldn't have had just 8 souls on the ark. We'd had people fighting to get onto the ark. But that wasn't what God wanted. God wanted people who were in love with Him. And so He made an ark that was extremely simple and bare bones, and only 8 people got on it. Now, if entertainment made people more spiritual, then I maintain that the USA would be the most spiritual nation ever on planet Earth, because we are so obsessed with our entertainment, we are so consumed with it, that even the thought of what I'm presenting here is going to offend some people. But the fact is, just like Solomon said all the way back in Ecclesiastes 1:8, the eye is not satisfied with seeing, and the ear is never filled with hearing. No matter what you give mankind, no matter how entertaining or recreational it is, he is always going to want more. Something bigger, something better, something more exciting. And if you cannot find it on a moral level, watch out. Because most people are willing to go to an immoral level to keep feeding the hunger of the flesh, and that never works out for the purpose of God. So we have this very extreme basic thing that started in the garden, then we have this very basic time on the ark, and then when Noah got off the ark, there was nothing. That was God's plan. God washed it all away in the flood and left absolutely nothing. And Noah started from scratch, because God's plan was to turn man's attention back to God. Now, some people, of course, make all kinds of arguments about, but we need all of this kind of comfort and wealth and what have you. Well, I don't think so. God gave us an example of somebody that He made very, very wealthy, and that, of course, is Solomon. In Solomon's time, gold was the thing. Silver was so common they didn't even count it. They said, well, silver was just like stone. That's 1 Kings 10:21 through 23. And so you have Solomon and his people living in all this magnificent wealth, and you think, okay, that's really going to make them spiritual, right? Didn't work that way, did it? If you know the story of Solomon, his wives turned his heart away from God, and he turned into worshiping pagans. And so you have Solomon, his wealth, his opulence, all the magnificence of the temple, the grandeur of all the priesthood, and all the beauty that would appeal in an entertaining way to the eye of men. And Israel was never happy with it, because the flesh will never ever be satisfied. Feeding the flesh is not the answer, and Solomon and Israel are an awesome example of that very point. So then we come a little later to the time of Jesus. Jesus came to build His church, and the ark was a foreshadow, a type of the church. We can read that a little bit in 1 Peter 3:20-21. And Jesus came along trying to turn hearts back to God. And when He did that, He did not use entertainment and recreation to get people on board. Now, I know folks that go, oh, yes, He did. He fed the 5,000. That was entertainment. That was recreation. No, folks, you need to go back and read John 6 with your own eyes before you buy that kind of nonsense. I know some people claim it, but the fact is, when Jesus fed the 5,000, He did not set up a tent and a buffet ahead of time and send out flyers telling everybody they're getting ready to have a big feed. Y'all come on down and get free food. In fact, nobody knew He was going to feed the folks until the end of the day. His own disciples didn't even know He was going to feed the folks. And then what did He feed them? He fed them barley bread and some salted fish. Now, I want you to think about that a second, because nothing is impossible for God. Jesus could have set up a buffet, miraculously set up a buffet fit for a king, and had every food item that would delight the heart of man on that buffet, and fed those people anything they wanted. And Jesus fed them barley bread and fish. That is not entertainment and recreation. That was the common meal of the day. And so when the people came around the next day wanting another free meal, Jesus refused to feed them. Now think about this a second, because what you have is 5,000 people were fed, and so you have there, right there, just about the makings of a super mega church just waiting to buy it, and all Jesus has got to do is agree to feed them another meal. And when Jesus sees that their heart is set on the food and not on God, he says no. And then he delivers that really difficult sermon and says, you've got to eat my flesh and drink my blood. And all the people walked away. And in John 6:67, Jesus looked at the remaining 12 and said, do you want to go away also? Now, folks, I don't know about you, but that doesn't qualify for modern entertainment that we see around us today. When people quote that as though Jesus was using recreation and entertainment to draw people into a carnival, that's just sophistry. You need to get away from that kind of person. We have another feeding account over Matthew 15. That's where he fed the 4,000. And this is even less entertaining, because it tells us directly in the text that Jesus did not feed them until they had been with him for 3 days without food. Now, I want to challenge all my friends out there that want to use entertainment and recreation to draw people into Jesus. I want them to put up the billboard and say, come listen to us preach for 3 days, and then we'll feed you after 3 days of you going without food. Just put up a billboard that says, hey, we're going to ready to have a free feed. We're just going to give you some barley bread and some salted fish, and see how many people come. No, religion isn't about entertainment and recreation. Religion is about seeking God with all your heart, and God is a rewarder of those that diligently seek him. And that's what's going on here. When we see the simplicity going in the garden, we see the simplicity of the ark and the world right after the ark, we see the simplicity of what Jesus did. God is looking for people who want him, not his gifts, not presents and blessings. He's looking for people that want him. Matthew 22:37-38, he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. That's why we're here. God put us on earth to seek him. Not entertainment is our purpose of life, but him. Now again, not trying to take all your entertainment away from you, but that is not the purpose of life. We're getting ready to move in with God if we're faithful. So what if heaven is nothing but what we read about in Revelation, and the best we can get out of Revelation is we're all standing around the throne and we're adoring God? What if that's all heaven is? For all eternity, you stand around the throne and you adore God and sing his praises. Do you still want to go? Or do you have to have some recreation and entertainment to get you on in? People that hunger to entertain the flesh would be bored to death in heaven. But people that hunger for God with all their heart, they're going to be in a state of eternal delight. And Christians that get it don't think that simple worship is boring, because they are seeking God. They're not seeking the flesh. And there is nothing boring about seeking the eternal God. So, thanks for listening. I hope you found this a little bit helpful, stirred up some thoughts. Share it wherever you do your social media. And as always, I hope you have a great day.